Book 3, The Professor, Section 4 of The Professor's House by Willa Cather. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. Book 3, The Professor, Section 4. The fall term of the university opened, and now the professor went to his lectures instead of to the lake. He supposed he did his work. He heard no complaints from his assistants, and the students seemed interested. He found, however, that he wasn't willing to take the trouble to learn the names of several hundred new students. It wasn't worth while. He felt that his relations with them would be of short duration. The McGregors got home from their vacation in Oregon, and Scott was much amused to find the professor so doggedly anchored in the old house. "It never struck me, Doctor, that you were a man who would be keeping up 2 establishments. They'll be coming home pretty soon, and then you'll have to decide where you are going to live." "I can't leave my study, Scott, that's flat." "Don't then. Darn it, you've got a right to 2 houses if you want 'em." This encounter took place on the street in front of the house. The professor went wearily upstairs and lay down on the couch, his refuge from this ever-increasing fatigue. He really didn't see what he was going to do about the matter of domicile. He couldn't make himself believe that he was ever going to live in the new house again. He didn't belong there. He remembered some lines of a translation from the Norse he used to read long ago in one of his mother's few books, a little 2-volume Ticknor and Fields edition of Longfellow, in blue and gold, that used to lie on the parlor table. "For thee a house was built ere thou wast born. For thee a mould was made ere thou of woman earnest." Lying on his old couch, he could almost believe himself in that house already. The sagging springs were like the sham upholstery that is put in coffins, just the equivocal American way of dealing with serious facts, he reflected. Why pretend that it is possible to soften that last hard bed? He could remember a time when the loneliness of death had terrified him, when the idea of it was insupportable. He used to feel that if his wife could but lie in the same coffin with him, his body would not be so insensible that the nearness of hers would not give it comfort. But now he thought of eternal solitude with gratefulness, as a release from every obligation, from every form of effort. It was the truth. One morning, just as St. Peter was leaving the house to go to his classroom, the postman handed him 2 letters, one addressed in Lillian's hand and one in Louis's. He put them into his pocket. The feel of them disturbed him. They were of a suspicious thinness, as if they didn't contain amusing gossip, but announced sudden decisions. He set off down the street, sniffing the lake-cooled morning air and trying to overcome a feeling of nervous dread. All the morning those 2 letters lay in his breast pocket. Though they were so light, their effect was to make him drop his shoulders and look woefully tired. The weather, too, had changed, come on suddenly hot and sultry at noon, as if getting ready for a storm. When his classes were over and he was back in his study again, St. Peter felt no interest in lunch. He took out the 2 letters and ripped them open with his forefinger to have it over. Yes, all plans were changed, and by the happiest of expectations. The family were hurrying home to prepare for the advent of a young Marcellus. They would sail on the 16th on the Berengaria. Lillian added a postscript to the effect that by this same mail she was getting off a letter to Augusta, who would come to him for the keys of the new house. She would be the best person to open the house and arrange to have the cleaning done. She would take it entirely off his shoulders and see that everything was properly put in order. They were sailing on the 16th, and this was the 17th. They were already on the water. The Berengaria was a 5-day boat. St. Peter caught up his hat and light overcoat and started down the stairs. Halfway down, he stopped short, went back to his study, and softly shut the door behind him. He sat down, forgetting to take off his overcoat, though the afternoon was so hot and his face was damp with perspiration. He sat motionless, breathing unevenly, one dark hand lying clenched on his writing table. There must, he was repeating to himself, there must be some way in which a man who had always tried to live up to his responsibilities could, when the hour of desperation came, avoid meeting his own family. He loved his family. He would make any sacrifice for them, but just now he couldn't live with them. He must be alone. That was more necessary to him than anything had ever been, more necessary even than his marriage had been in his vehement youth. He could not live with his family again, not even with Lillian, especially not with Lillian. Her nature was intense and positive. It was like a chiseled surface, a die, a stamp upon which he could not be beaten out any longer. If her character were reduced to an heraldic device, it would be a hand, a beautiful hand, holding flaming arrows, the shafts of her violent loves and hates, her clear-cut ambitions. In great misfortunes, he told himself, people want to be alone. They have a right to be. And the misfortunes that occur within one are the greatest. Surely the saddest thing in the world is falling out of love, if once one has ever fallen in. Falling out for him seemed to mean falling out of all domestic and social relations, out of his place in the human family indeed. St. Peter did not go out of the house that afternoon. He did not leave his study. He sat at his desk with bent head, reviewing his life, trying to see where he had made his mistake, to account for the fact that he now wanted to run away from everything he had intensely cared for. Late in the afternoon, the heaviness of the air in the room drove him to the window. He saw that a storm was coming on. Great orange and purple clouds were blowing up from the lake, and the pine trees over about the physics laboratory were blacker than cypresses and looked contracted, as if they were awaiting something. The rain broke, and it turned cold. The rainstorm was over in half an hour, but a heavy blow had set in for the night. The wind would be a protection, he thought. Even Augusta would hardly come plodding up the stairs tonight. It seemed strange to be dreading Augusta, but just now he did dread her. He believed he was safe for tonight. Though it was only 5 o'clock, the sky was black, and the room was dusky and chilly. He lit the stove and lay down on the couch. The fire made a flickering pattern of light on the wall. He lay watching it vacantly. Without meaning to, he fell asleep. For a long while he slept deeply and peacefully. Then the wind, increasing in violence, disturbed him. He began to be aware of noises, things banging and slamming about. He turned over on his back and slept deeper still. When St. Peter at last awoke, the room was pitch black and full of gas. He was cold and numb, felt sick and rather dazed. The long-anticipated coincidence had happened, he realized. The storm had blown the stove out and the window shut. The thing to do was to get up and open the window. But suppose he did not get up? How far was a man required to exert himself against accident? How would such a case be decided under English law? He hadn't lifted his hand against himself. Was he required to lift it for himself? End of Book 3, The Professor, Section 4.